Right, so good morning. Apologies for the bit of technical hitch there, and thank you for the invite to come and present and chair today as well. So as John said, I work now for Innovate UK KTM, and before I wanted to start today's proceedings, I just wanted to give you a bit of an outline of what KTM do for those of you that don't know. So I've got just a short introduction to Innovate UK KTM. So we exist really to make those connections between innovators and also new partners and new funding opportunities. And that's really great because we want to help to find solutions for real world problems. Innovate UK KTM is now part of the Innovate UK group, and that happened just before Christmas, so back in November, and so we're now very firmly embedded with the group. So the organisation works across 22 sectors, including things like biotechnology, digital, chemistry, manufacturing and transport, to name but a few. And we have offices in Edinburgh, London and Harwell. So just moving on to the agri-food team, which is the team that I'm part of. So within the team, we've got expertise in livestock and aquaculture, so fish farming, crops, and also on the food side as well. And we help by making those connections between different partners that are seeking funding, but also helping them secure that funding so we can help make sure that their applications are sort of well written and getting on with some key points. We can help offer expert insight, go into that in a bit more detail as well in a few moments, and also keep people up to date via our newsletters, etc., around funding competitions that are coming up, and also some of the work that's been already funded and that people can read about and know what's been going on. So the best way to demonstrate the value of some of our work is really to give you, to go through a case study. So this one is around sort of insect proteins that have great potential to help solve some of the global challenges that we're facing at the moment. And in this particular piece of work, we brought together 15 organisations that came together and that led to them bidding for funding to develop technology to upcycle food waste into animal feedstuffs using black soldier fly. So they were awarded £5.9 million of Innovate UK funding, which went towards a £9.8 million project. And you can see that there's a sort of 2 or 3 of the expected outcomes from the project. So they anticipate that by 2040, they'll have created over 3,000 jobs in the UK. They also expect to generate revenues of 400 million for UK taxpaying businesses, and also to deliver savings of 50 million tonnes of CO2 equivalents, which is going to help bring those industries close to their net zero ambitions for emissions. So this is, I just wanted to share with you a couple of quotes that we've got from 2 of the partners. So this is Kieran Whitaker at Intercycle, who describes the fact that, you know, we bring together our expertise and connections that help turn that project into a reality. And we'll bring the UK's first industrial scale protein production facility into fruition. This is another one from Thomas Ferrugia at Betabugs, who also sort of found some real value with working with us to help bring that project into reality. So I mentioned before that we get sort of expert insight, and the way that we do that is by bringing people together in sector boards. So we have an animal sector advisory board, plant sector advisory board, and also a food sector board, food sector group. And within those groups, we bring together industry, academics and government representatives. We discuss the themes around innovation and opportunities that there might be and what the priorities are for those different sectors. And also that helps inform the work that we do, and including events and reports, so things like thought leadership pieces, and also helps us identify potential funding streams that we can talk to our funding partners around. And it helps focus the work that we do so that we can benefit the whole sector. Just moving on to what we're going to cover today, and thinking about the theme of today, which is the trials, tribulations and successes of IPM in the field. And lots of you will have worked with Innovate UK in the past, but I just wanted to just flag up that obviously Innovate UK KTN can now help on the journey, linking you with collaborators, investors and funding competitions. So what is IPM? It means such a lot of things. We talk about this every time we say the words IPM. It means such a lot of different things to different people, and that really depends on your perspective. So we can see in this word cloud here that there's some really specific words in here, things like fungal and caterpillar, etc. And then much broader words or phrases like management, interaction, conservation, and implementation. And I wonder sometimes whether the fact that we have so many different views of what IPM is and what it means to us as individuals can sometimes make it much harder to embed. And those are sort of, that could potentially be a barrier for us to overcome. So I was thinking about the components that are required for us to be able to successfully integrate pest management into our everyday lives, really. And the themes or the topics that we're covering today really are a really good clue to that. So around that policy side, we've got sort of changes to the agriculture bill, loss of basic payments, and that move towards public money for public good via ELMS, etc., as well as the 25-year environment plan, which will help to implement changes that will help safeguard our environment. But there's also changes to the regulatory situation post-Brexit, where we're seeing changes to import and export regulations, which can make it a bit more difficult for people to move produce around. But it will also help with the biosecurity in this country, and as well, and we'll be hearing more about that from our first two speakers. On the research side, developing techniques, technologies and approaches can result in hypotheses with intended consequences, but you can also end up with sometimes unintended consequences for those, which can be either positive or negative from an IPM perspective. And that may lead to needing to do further work or tweaking the outcomes of that work. And that can end up with making it a lengthy process. Changes in policy or new methodologies often require new tools to deliver them. So things like better metrics, diagnostics, or improved monitoring. And this needs providers and supply networks often, which is not always easy in my experience, to bridge that gap between a tool that you've developed or a product that needs sometimes to be needs another partner to be able to actually bring that into everyday life and make that an easy one to use. And then lastly, and often the biggest challenge, and certainly in my AHDB career, this is the one that we always was the challenging part. It's that uptake of IPM, and it can be really hard, that dissemination and getting the implementation of that in the field. And there are often barriers that need to be addressed to make that happen. So when we think about IPM as well, one of the phrases that we often use is this: minimising the reliance on pesticides and maxing the use of alternatives. But are there enough alternatives that are available to make this really viable yet? So one of the things that's often needed is that sort of very clever and careful monitoring, regular and detailed monitoring of crops, so that we know what's there and how many there are for threshold purposes. And sometimes those thresholds are linked to approval of pesticides, sometimes out in the field and when we know to take action. But sometimes it's not quite as simple as that, because in some crops, even sort of just a few aphids, for instance, or virus-carrying insects can make that crop unsaleable, particularly if it's something like seed potatoes. And also there can be even contaminants, so in things like ready-to-eat crops that can be quite problematic. So knowing what the thresholds is and what's important for various crops can be really challenging. We also know that we can change the environment, and that can help us as an alternative sometimes to using pesticides and relying on pesticides. But that really is only effective in protected crops currently. So increasing natural predators, and often we can do that by providing increasing food sources, by field margins, etc. And that's a really good option that's beginning to be much more widely used. Obviously, biological control, again, is another alternative, but often only useful in glasshouse crops. Still very limited, really, for outdoor crops, particularly when temperatures are challenging. And it's long been the case that IPM is much more embedded in protected crops and often more in horticultural crops than arable. But we do need to develop effective and probably different strategies for the wider agricultural environment to make this a really viable proposition. So I'm really looking forward to today's presentations to hear how the various components from policy change to the tools that farmers are already using and developing to enable sustainable and resilient approaches to become much more widespread. So thank you for your attention, and I wanted just to, on this last slide, just to give you my contact details. There's a link there, or a link to our website or webpage to sign up for our agri-food newsletter, where you can hear about new competitions that are coming along, and also a link to a page on our website which will tell you about all of the Innovate UK transforming food production food competitions that are on the go at the moment.